Been coming up here for, I guess, like a decade now to this event, and, man, anybody else out there feel like there's nobody for them? Shit. We are here at the Root School for their annual rendezvous 3-day primitive skills event. On day one here, and I'm just walking down to see what classes I can take next year.
Yeah.
So, good afternoon, everybody. We are going to be playing with fire. Don't ever let anyone tell you not to play with fire. Just play intentionally, or work with fire and just have fun doing it. But obviously, let's not get hurt or burn anything down. So clearly, fire skills are really traditional. Human beings have been working with fire for a long time. In fact, longer than we've been Homo sapien. There's evidence in the archaeological record of Homo erectus working with friction fire technology. You know, kind of blows my mind if you think about that. It's like for more than 400,000 years. Wow. This is the first class I've taught with my baby. So,
Oh God.
yeah. So far, so good. So anyway,
You want to pay attention.
this is one of my favorite friction fire technologies because of how simple it is. It's 2 parts. Some of you have probably done bow drill or been played with other friction fire technologies, which are all amazing, and they all have their place in their cultural context and their ecological context. The hand drill is one of the most ubiquitous friction fire technologies across cultures, across time, across geographic ranges and different climates. And it's one of the simplest because it's, as far as, you know, the fewer amounts of parts compared to bow drill or something else. But on the flip side, so there's fewer parts, but that means the human part becomes that much more important, right? So, so how many parts are in this kit? 2. Well, it's actually 3.
The human part.
The human part, right? So I kind of gave that away a little bit, but so because of that, yes, it's a simple thing to find and to manufacture, but it takes more time up front to learn the skill, right? So form and technique become more important with hand drill than they might be with bow drill or something that has a more mechanical advantage, right? So because of that, we are going to be so the way that I teach this class, especially in a 2-hour period, is teaching you how to learn hand drill, not specifically teaching you to make a fire today. Okay, some of you might make fires today, but I found that it's actually almost distracting or not helpful to make that your goal. Like when I was learning hand drill, I got discouraged because of how hard it was. And my goal was like, I just want to make the fire, obviously. But I was running into a lot of problems, a lot of challenges, blisters, frustration with the whole practice process until I changed my perspective around it. When I switched my goal from I want to make this fire to I want to practice with this technology, everything changed. It lightened up. It made the experience of practicing a lot more of almost like a meditation or like a spiritual practice. And I was able to let go of the expectation of fire. And instead, it allowed me to focus on creating really good form and really good technique and building up my strength and stamina and just really being with the technology. And literally, it was like a couple years of practice, on and off practice, where I wasn't getting the fire. And then after like 3 weeks of just from that shift, it just started happening almost on accident. Just because I was like, I'm going to do it 5 minutes every other day. And I'm going to sit with this and I'm going to focus on these different details of different like checkpoint details to be aware of while you're practicing that are going to result in good, efficient form and technique. And so that's what my class is all about. I've got these exercises that I've devised and that help kind of focus on individual aspects of your form and your technique. And I'm going to share those with you. And we're going to get our hands on it. And by the end of this workshop block, you're going to at least have a checklist of things that you know how to pay attention to while you're practicing, so that in a short period of time, weeks if not less, you'll be able to be making fire with hand drill. Okay, so that's my infomercial intro. And as far as now, like my approach and how I'm teaching this. There's basically two parts to this whole thing. One part is locating and then like making the kit, finding your materials and processing them, and then the other part is the form and technique stuff. So before I get into making the kits, and we're gonna demonstrate, we're gonna process some wood into some fireboards and process some goldenrod into some stock. So we'll kind of do that all together, and then we'll get into some of the details about that. And then we'll get in, once everyone has some kits in their hands that they can at least pass around and share. I don't think, may or may not be able to pull off getting kits in every one of your hands, like in time for me to like get into the form and technique parts, but we can share and trade off. And once we have some kits, then we'll get into some of the nitty-gritty details. But before I talk a whole lot more, I should probably show you how this works.
It is okay for people to walk up closer and see, right?
Yeah, you can. We'll do this again.
Yeah. It's just hard to see from right here. Something burning.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Whoa. Firebender. Yes. What? It's so white.
I saw it.
Saw fear. I saw fear.
Don't burn your beard.
Nice a tip.
It's pretty good tinder,
Anyway.
isn't it?
I'll try to get one more flame out of it. Just for the fun of it. It's kind of a small tinder, but I think you get the idea, right? Okay.
Make charcoal on fire.
So part of the lesson here is
Be firebender.
if you're really trying to make the fire to use it and to light it, what's one thing you may have just learned from watching to do differently?
Dry tinder.
I don't know if it's differently or right on, but I would hold the bundle up higher so the smoke's not going in my face.
Sure, that's a good one. The thing that, the reason it failed the first time is that the tinder, first of all, was kind of damp, and it's small. This is a small amount of tinder.
That's like advanced fire starting. It's
Yeah.
like a challenge fire starting.
Yeah.
This is like, I'm too lazy to make it big enough before class.
Or
Kind of
that.
tinder. So it's possible, but if you're really trying to get a fire and it's an important situation where you need a fire, you always want to have more tinder than less, and you always want to keep it as dry as possible. So build it up. So that is what it looks like. That is hand drill. And so you asked a good question. Can you ask it again?
Does the coal come off the end of the goldenrod or off the oak or hickory or whatever the hardwood is?
Okay, so this is cedar. The generic term for this is like hearth or the fireboard.
Okay.
See? Yeah. And
and
here's there's the spindle.
Let me show you how this works.
And the dust actually, the coal comes from both. As you're abrading, as you're making the friction. Thanks, really. You know, these sockets burn down, and you get like basically, I need to make a new one now. Seasons are all expired, used up. So some of the dust is coming from this wood, and then this over time actually shrinks as well. So you're getting it from both pieces. And yeah, and so we're gonna go through this a little bit, but I can give you a kind of a quick overview now. The spindles for hand drill they're not solid wood, right? These are the flowering stalks from biennial plants, right? So mostly, right? So this is goldenrod. This is giant goldenrod with cattail even. Yucca, of course, if you're down in the southwest. But basically, the thing that's important to pay attention to or to understand when you're looking for hand drill materials is not to worry so much about the specific species, but the characteristics of them. And so this is like the woody part of, you know, a flowering stalk, but in the middle, it's like hollow almost. It's foamy with pith, it's called, right? Pith is like nature's styrofoam kind of stuff. And it's the middle of this is almost hollow compared to the outside, right? But if it were hollow, that would actually not be ideal. It's that having that pith in the center of your stalk is one of those characteristics that you're looking for in a hand drill stalk material, right? I harvested these Solidago giganticus, the giant goldenrods, several years ago in Albany, New York, actually, and have just kept them dry. And, you know, so like a lot of primitive skills and a lot of other things in life, you just gather your materials and you take care of them. So, you know, like that's one of the biggest tricks with primitive fires. Like you get your materials in advance and you keep them dry, right? Not to say like you can't go out and just do this from scratch in an emergency, but it's a heck of a lot easier if you have dry materials to start with. So that's what we have to work with today. And all right, I'll just kind of demonstrate the process. So you're looking for as straight a stalk as possible. And this one here has got a bend right here. And from here down, it's pretty straight. So I'm going to show you how I do this. This class is going to be mostly demonstration and some hands-on. And then if some of you want to actually go home with a kit, I'll help you make it and I'll sell it to you. I'll ask you for material fees. Okay, so that's a pretty sweet stalk already, just as it is. It's got some wiggle to it, but it's overall straight. The next thing you would often want to do is scrape off some of the prickly parts if there's any like bumpy stuff on there, because that will shred your hands pretty quickly if you don't take that off. It's okay to have some texture. In fact, that's really good, but if it's pokey, you want that to not be pokey anywhere. And the bottom here has an angle, so you want to carve the bottom of the stalk to be basically as flat as possible to begin with, or overall flat enough. Okay.
And as far as the length,
the length can vary. On some, you know, in theory, on some degree, like the longer it is, the better, as far as getting a lot of friction without a lot of cooling off periods, right? Because every time you stop to get to the bottom and have to get to the top again, it's cooling off. And likewise, well, every time you change directions like this, there's a micro cool off period of time. That'll come in, we'll talk more about that in a bit, but this is pretty much an ideal length for me. I can use them half this length because I've been doing this for a while. But once they get much longer, they get really wobbly. And if you get it, you can have it really tall, like mullen, and what I call a stand drill instead of hand drill, because you can stand on the fireboard and just like like that. But basically, it gets wobbly and cumbersome the longer it gets, and the harder it is to transport without breaking it, because they're kind of fragile. All right, so this thing is pretty much ready to go, ready to burn in. So the next thing to do would be to process the fireboard. Hatchets are pretty handy for this.
Likely.
So I don't want to mess this thing up. I'm gonna grab this log. I'm gonna bring it closer. Didn't want to be the guy, the first person to chop into this picnic table, but I will beat it up a little bit. Okay, so the fireboard, or the hearth, a lot of people call the fireboard the hearth, is you can use any wood for this. The question is, how hard do you want to work? And how hard do you want to practice to get it to work from a non-ideal source of material? So having said that, the best materials to use for your hearth boards are basically medium density woods, soft to medium, not too soft and for sure not too hard. This is northern white cedar, which is my absolute favorite. It's just perfect for this. Not because it's cedar per se, but just because of its density, right? So basswood is another really good medium density, and not talking like hardwood versus softwood is in like forestry terms. I'm actually talking about density of wood, because some people talk about hardwoods as anything with broad leaves and softwoods anything with needles, but that's not. I'm talking about an actual material characteristic. So cedar's awesome for this, and that's what I have. And so another thing that's good about cedar is it splits pretty straight. And so what I'm going to do is just, this is too thick, right? I need to get it to these dimensions. And what we're looking for with the hand drill fireboard is basically, we're kind of like milling it into a piece of lumber in a way, but we're using our knives to do it. The thickness is the important thing to pay attention to. And basically, if you hold your spindle stock up to the side, you kind of want the thickness of the fireboard to match the width of your spindle. And that goes true with bow drill as well. It's a proportions thing that is really helpful to make your kits this way. If you make it too thick, then you're getting a lot of inefficient, unproductive friction. You're working harder for not anything useful. Exactly. And if you make it
goes down into the wood instead of into the
what happens is as it bores down in, you get sidewall friction, which just squeaks and it makes you have to work harder and doesn't give you any of the dust that eventually is going to turn into a coal. Likewise, if it's too thin, you're just going to bore through it quickly. You might get one fire out of it before you have to make a whole new socket, right? So the golden ratio really is just to match the thickness of your fireboard to your spindle. So it's kind of like pencil thickness for hand drill, more or less. Maybe a fat marker or something. So that's what we're going to do with this. And I could probably, if I'm careful, I can maybe get 4 fireboards out of this. Such a cute little hatchet. Okay. Yeah, it's pretty popular for this. It's pretty good. It's actually a little on the soft side though. So you can make it work. You just have to change your speed, pressure, the ratios of like how much speed and pressure. We'll get into that with once we get this on your hands. Okay. Oops, that one's too thin. So this one split. Oh, it's too thin. We'll maybe use this to make a spoon or something. Eating paddle.
Nice.
All right, so now I could have had two perfect ones. Now I've got a thin one and a fat one. So I'm just gonna shave this off real quick. For the sake of this class, and actually in real life too, like you don't necessarily have to make the entire fireboard perfect to begin with. You just need a section, you know, that's the right thickness for when you need the fire. That cute little hatchet is a little too crude, so I'm just gonna get it down there with my knife. By the way, this is one of my all-time favorite whittling activities, projects. It's making friction fire kits. It can teach you a lot about knife use and just the reduction process. I won't throw the knife at Torin on purpose. Here, please. Okay, so I got this pretty much to the thickness I want. Flat is nice too. If it's too like wobbly, then you could have issues with the dust migrating underneath the fireboard instead of collecting in one place, which is what you want it to do.
If one part's thinner and the other part's thicker, then you're gonna be doing a lot less work on the thinner parts, therefore doing a lot less work on the thicker parts, and vice versa.
Yeah, that's a good observation.
That's why you want it at the same length, so you're doing the exact same amount every time, or just about.
Yeah, that's a really good observation.
The less work you have to do, the faster you can get it going.
That's right. Work smarter, not harder.
That's exactly.
So this is pretty sweet. It's a nice fireboard. These are cute too. I love the smell of this stuff. You can kind of get obsessive with this, and I encourage you to when you're making your own kit, whether it's today or some other time. Notice how I'm doing a lot of looking down the kit. So the other detail about the fireboard is you want this edge to be pretty much perpendicular to the top and bottom. So it's like 90-degree angle, more or less. Not super critical, but pretty useful to just do it, make your kits like that every time. All right, now I'll put this away. Now that we've got the two critical components to our kit, it's time to actually burn in a socket, right? Because you can pass this around, you guys can check it out, but that fireboard looks different than this one because it's been used and it's set up. It's a finished fireboard, and the kit, in order to finish the kit, we have to burn in a socket and then carve the notch, right? So the sockets are obviously the place where the hand drill is like burning down into the wood. The notch is a critical part of each socket, an important part of the kit, and the notch is where all this hot dust gathers, and once that notch is full of dust, that only then can it actually increase in temperature and start to burn and turn into, we've been calling it a coal. It's really, ember is probably a more accurate term. A coal is not quite the same thing, but you can't really get a coal or an ember. It's a lot harder to get one without a notch. It's possible to just burn without a notch and you'll get what's called a ring coal, but you just work your butt off to do it, and
it's too much.
It's just, you don't need to do it like that.
In a survival situation, you're not going to have time to do that.
Yeah, and you're not going to want to waste your energy.
Exactly.
So that's why we're going to carve a notch, and we'll get into that in a sec. So this is an important detail, which is where you place your socket, right? If the socket is too close to the edge of the fireboard, you're going to have a hard time keeping this thing in the socket, and you're not going to have a deep enough notch, right? So what you want to do is like make an indentation about, an 1/8 or 3/16 of an inch from the edge, right? Slightly less than a pencil's width from the edge. I don't know if you can see that, but I basically just sketched this with pressure, and now I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to carve a shallow square like this around that. I basically circled it with a square.
You squared it.
I squared it. I squared my circle. And now if you make a few like little kerf slices, you can easily pop those out, and you basically have created a little indented square, right? And that's just enough. It's all you really need to keep this in the same place while you're burning in your socket, right? If you don't have something like that, then as you're turning, this thing is just wobbling all over the place and you can't really control where it goes. You don't always have to do it like that. You can oftentimes just like press really hard and skip the whole carving the box thing, but it's not always reliable. So this is how I like to do it. Now it's ready to burn in. And then once it's burned in, then we can carve the notch, and then it's a functional kit. Okay, so